Hello, everybody. I guess let me know if you can see and hear me. Looks like we've got some people in the chat. Valander, who sounds like he's tired, Gel Tip, and Clavicus81. And Valander confirms that he can see and hear me. There's green users, Bob and Julie. So hello, welcome to another Monday. Valander's not tired, brain fried from work. Well, that's a kind of tired. If my brain is tired, the rest of me isn't doing a whole lot. Which is probably not the correct answer. All right, let's switch over to this view and add more light. Hold on, I will adjust this. Although, once I put the palette out, you won't see that, but right now, it will be for tools, I guess. So I was wrestling with what to do today, and kind of came up with two different things. So in theory, we'll be doing two different things through the show. Because I know sometimes y'all like it if I mix you up as well. Mix it up, not mix you up. I don't want to mix you up. So the first thing I want to do is work on preparing a couple of miniatures for painting on a later show. Sorry, my chair seems a little slippery today. I'm not trying to make everything shake around. So I've got Mako the Tiki Shark, which is a fundraiser for the Maui fires that you can get on Beeper right now. And Rael Rainfeather, I think, if I am remembering correctly, a lovely bard who you can also get on Beeper right now. This is the miniature of the month, so the gift with purchase one, but then you can also just buy it if you don't want to mess with that. Not that it's very hard. The cart's all coded, so it kind of figures it out for you, which is good because I like when things figure it out for me. So mine are both 3D prints, I think. Yes. I don't know if all the production ones are, because this is not a thing that I know. But these are the tweezers that are in the Barrowgate box that the people at Reaper use to get rid of these little support things on 3D prints. So if you couldn't make it last week, I went through the contents of the Barrowgate box and showed the miniatures and the paints. We swatched out the colors of the paints. Wait, I have that handy actually somewhere. And I showed you the cool source book that you get, which I believe you can also purchase separately now. So these are the colors that are in the Barrowgate box, which are not currently available separately. I suspect if they have extra sets left over, they'll sell them as sets. And then these are this is the 3-pack that was in the swag bag, and I believe this already is up on the ReaperMini.com site for purchase if you wish. All of these were metallics. And I was kind of thinking it might be fun to paint her outfit as like silk or satin using some of these colors. And probably some other colors as well. Just, I think it's been a fair while since I did my using colored metallics for non-metal objects show, so I thought it might be fun to do that again. Take a look at some different colors than what I painted that time. I showed all the miniatures that are in the Barrowgate box and the miniatures from ReaperCon that are already up for sale on the site. And I also made an unboxing video on my own YouTube channel, where I actually figured out how to take this view and in editing zoom in a little. So I have not figured out how to do that on Twitch or through OBS, if that is possible. And it might not work for the stream because, you know, I'm sometimes showing different things and it would probably take fiddling to go back and forth. So it's nice to be able to do things in editing. So this particular one is not coming up with the tweezers. And now that I have finished tweezing, I believe, I will go into my second preferred tool. So the Barrowgate box included one of these. which is like a super fine file. Like I could sit there and do this for a while and it's not going to bother me. I believe it's a little, this is like super fine and this is, pretty fine. And the people at Reaper also use these for cleaning up prints. I like a knife. I'm not recommending anyone else use a knife. I'm just saying what I like to do, because I'm not going to recommend that other people play with sharp objects. I may, in fact, be a cautionary tale for why not to play with sharp objects. Valander said he would like to paint 2 of these to flank the Tiki Lunette from Christine Van Patten, and I think that would be super cool. So Christine Van Patten sculpts for Reaper, but this is something from her own line, Moonlight Minis, the figure that Valander's talking about. And you can get her at a decent size. I think I do have one here somewhere. Not convenient enough to grab to show next to Mako. But I think that is a cool idea. I had some basing thoughts for Mako. But I think they are things that I would be able to paint and then mess with if I wanted. So I may start with the painting and then move on to the basing. We'll see. Maybe I'll do some basing next week. I don't know. I thought I had my angles all figured out before I started. I think what it is I changed the strength of my magnifying visor lenses. It comes with 3 different strengths, I think, and you can purchase a couple of different ones if you want to swap them out. And I decided to try the least amount of magnification, so holding the miniature further away from my face in the hopes that this might be less annoying to my back, and also would probably work well with the camera distance. But I may not have gotten it exactly right. Sometimes it is a process. I feel like the light is more of the problem. I am awaiting a new lamp. I went in that Kickstarter for that Redgrass, lamp. I don't know if I'm going to be able to set it up to work well for streaming. I certainly hope so. But since it kind of has 2 panels, flanges, I don't know what to call them, it is my hope that we can get slightly different angles. Or that one day I'll be able to get a lamp kind of from this side, which I do not currently have. That's why the palette is a little dark. We bought a new lamp for the dining room where we play board games, and you can angle it some, and I thought you could point it down, and it turns out that you cannot. So you can't point it completely down. You can kind of have it 90 degrees or upwards so that it's like a shaded lamp, which, I mean, that's going to be nicer for board games, because the problem with our other lamps is that, something was getting in somebody's face usually. So some people could see better, and then some people could see less. Because dining room lights are just not designed to actually see things. They just want you to do the mood lighting with the food, I guess. So despite my best efforts when we renovated our dining room, we still need more light in there. So anyway, I tried that lamp, and I felt it was not accomplishing much because I couldn't really get it looking straight down at the table. So I gave up on that. Valander also uses an X-Acto. So I don't use an X-Acto on metal miniatures typically. You can't really scrape it, and I'd just rather file. I know there are people who do very successfully, but I am not one of them, I guess. But for resin, and the 3D prints are basically a type of resin, it's really nice because you can scrape something smooth and you can kind of tell that it's smooth. Because if the knife blade is going over the entire area, it pretty much has to be smooth. And then it's also easy to cut off any little remaining struts there might be. So like there's one here, I don't know if you can quite, you can see it from the side against the darkness of the base right there. So that's just like a little tiny dot of additional material. So I can kind of get under there and slice it a little, and then just scrape to be sure that it is smooth with the surface of the fabric so that I will be able to paint it to look like nice smooth fabric. And in fact, this is my favorite way to prep miniatures. It's like the one that it isn't too painful or lengthy, and that I can feel that I got the best possible quality of results. I mean, you don't always need the best possible quality results, but back in the day, resin miniatures were going to be pricier, so they likely were things that you wanted to take some time over or paint as a gift or a contest entry or something. Oops. I guess I moved that into a position where I'm going to hit it with my lenses. But I think I need to do the thing about the resin is then the little dust is kind of staticky and it's hard to tell if it's something you've already removed or not. So I like to use my canned air to check on that. See, that I think is a piece of dust and not anything on the miniature. Just look how sharp our little hair tendrils are. That looks like a bit of stuff. Since her hair is up, that's definitely not a hair tendril. And I know there was one on her chin, so I'm just going to double check that. I don't want to end up having to paint her and she looks like she's got a mole or a pimple on her chin. I mean, that might be interesting, but better to do it with paint somewhere where I intend it to be, because where that little dot is, it might just not, it might end up looking weird because of natural shadows in a way that I wouldn't be able to paint out. And I think that's pretty much it. Oh, wait, here's one more little sticky out bit. And no mold lines. It's so magical. So magical. So yeah, we got these little things. But they are more randomly distributed than a mold line, where once you know they're put together kind of the same way as Easter bunnies, you can kind of find all the mold lines. They're hard to disguise as being something else. If you have like just a little part, you can disguise it. So she's very much in motion with her feet, and there's just a little bit of extra material under each foot that I'm going to see if I can get rid of some of it. But if you were intending to paint her quickly for a game, you could just put black paint in there, and I'm sure that that would largely disguise it. I'm not going to go too nuts. I want her to be attached to the base, and having the feet like that is already a smaller attachment point than normal, but I want to be able to, pack her up to bring to ReaperCon or whatever other thing I'm doing. If I, finish her, which is by no means guaranteed. So I think that's about it. I mean, I'm probably missing something because it's easy to miss something, especially when I'm on stream. But I think I can probably live with it. And I'm not that fussed about it. I do want to prime this. I think that this is not like the PVC plastic miniatures, and neither. See, this is the thing you shouldn't do. Don't do this. This is not like the Bones Black or Classic Bones. I think that the resin style Prince and Bones USA probably are going to do better with priming. So I have my brush primer off to the side so I can do that. Oh, when I was talking about these fine things, I also like these. These are sanding needles, I think they're called. Sanding sticks, sanding needles. And I think the company that makes them is Alpha. I have found them on Amazon. I've also found them at my local Hobby Town. The white is finer than the blue. And I use these on the soft plastic bones as well. If you use them with a soft hand, it's fine. The main thing I actually want to file here is the bottom. So I need something else. But I don't know what. I don't really have a larger diamond file, I don't think. I'm not sure that a cross file will work, but it's the base, so who cares? Let's find out. Oh, that's not too bad. Now, I mean, in an ideal world, that is actual dust. That's not little pieces like I was picking up off the other things. You do not want to breathe resin dust. So I'm not going to blow this around. I have some isopropyl alcohol off to the side that I'm going to dunk both these in. So I will just leave it to that to get rid of the dust and switch over to Mako. You got toothpick size of these? Huh. That sounds interesting. Where'd you get that? So I've only ever seen these or things like this that are on, that's like a foam core. Like if you ever had that foam core tape, it's kind of like that, but there's a file to either side. And then I've seen like little stick versions of that. But I prefer, this is like a hard plastic rod that they've put some kind of coating on, and it does go down to that tip, so you can get in to some of the small miniature areas that way. I think this is the one that I already pulled off some of the things with the tweezers last time. So this is another one. And he had quite substantial supports, but they're still coming off with these tweezers just fine. So, but I'm going to keep working on this guy. I worked on him a little bit before the show started. I was using him to test the camera position and stuff. Oh, look at his little toenails. That's so cute. Little tiny toenails. And still with wood grain. I would apologize for getting so excited about something small, but everybody watching probably also gets excited about small little guys. So I don't have to explain it to you all. So I know from the other side that there's not really supposed to be material there, since he is pretty symmetrical. And if I mess this up, the nice thing about a wood object like this is that I can just pretend that it's wear and tear. Or I could use this to add some additional wear and tear. I'm not going to. If I decide that I want him worn and torn, I'll do it with paint, but I have not done my research yet into looking at some examples of tikis to see how I might want to paint him. Gel Tip will have to look to see what the tools are and thinks they might be from Vallejo. Are there pits from the support? If so, how will I fill those? I have not noticed any pits. So there's a little hole here, but these are sculpted. The same with this little scratch there. So he does have some weathering. I guess like it's worm-eaten wood or something. So perhaps I should paint him to be more weathered, but you know, people repaint things. Whereas I'm not seeing any of those types of marks on Rael. So I know that that's intentional on Mako, and it's intentional to not have those on Mako. As far as how I would fill pits, in my experience, sometimes you'll get metal miniatures that have pitting. I don't think I have an example with me. Particularly if they're big figures, like those big Bobby Jackson chunky robe figures are the ones that I noticed it happening on a lot. And I think Brian, who used to work at Reaper, explained it to me once. It's something about when the metal goes in, it starts to cool immediately. And the larger pieces, because they take a little larger to fill, or thicker, I think it was more about the thickness, not the size, you could get pitting on the surface. So the nice thing was it was unlikely to happen on faces or, hands. They would tend to be smaller areas. It was usually just robes. You can eventually fill it with primer. It will take a while. But a better thing to do is sealer. So I'll paint on coats of sealer until I've smoothed out the pitting. I think Anne has said that Reaper gloss is not as viscous, but in most cases gloss sealer is more viscous, and if something's heavily pitted, you'll get there faster, but you run the risk of adding texture yourself with brush strokes or where the edge of it is. So you have to be a little more careful on your end, whereas multiple coats of this, you're less likely to run into that problem. And I will even kind of take it on the end of the brush, and if it was something like this where it's like a little hole, you can kind of dip it in, just touch the tip of the brush to that hole, and it will kind of suck in the material. Probably some element of fluid dynamics there that I don't know the technical explanation for. And you may have to do that a few different times, but you can eventually fill. Minor surface imperfections, that is my preferred way, because I don't have to get out green stuff or mess with anything, and making sure green stuff is smooth is more difficult as well. I would probably use, if it was somewhat bigger things or like a larger surface area, I would use epoxy sculpt or Milliput. Those are both somewhat water soluble, so you can kind of put them in, scrape things off with your tool, and then go over it with a damp brush to really make sure it's smooth and that the edges are integrated with the surface and stuff. I'm much less good at doing that with green stuff, and green stuff sticky and annoying to work with. But you would have to have it would have to be more than just little pits. I haven't really noticed a lot of pitting from 3D printed things. It's more likely to have bumps that go up than pits that go in, and he doesn't have a lot. Let's see if Vielle looked like she had more, so let's see the other base. So not that big one. Let me get rid of that big one. But you can kind of see, because of lighting, that there's like little goosebumps, almost. If a miniature could have goosebumps, that's what it's like. But they're really so slight, you're not going to see it, in profile that much. So that's what I was filing down. And filing or scraping is how I would solve that. Valerie, I have no information about the process other than someone who took the tour during ReaperCon posted a picture of a big brick of them. So they're manufacturing them like a bunch at a time. And I think I may have downloaded this picture. Let me take a quick look, because it was just so cool. Alas, did I download the name of the person who took this picture? No. I'll turn that off for a sec. So they come out like this. This is how it prints. And then they break each of those guys off and put them in a blister for us. So that is literally as much as I know about the process. I would have liked to take the tour. I've always enjoyed taking the tour, and there's always new stuff like that to find out. But I did not have the time to do it. So for those bumpy things, this is where I prefer scraping. And you can usually tell visually whether you've got it or not. You can go from different angles to kind of verify. And that would take a little more time. That's why since it wasn't an area that we're going to look at and I just was doing it for stability, I went with a file. But if I had to do this, if there was a surface of the miniature that had a little bit of this, I could do it. One thing I think that makes a big difference in the 3D printing is how you align the miniature. Like if you remember in that picture, he was kind of diagonal, and that was probably to minimize the supports on the parts of the figure you care about. So that's part of the trick, I think, with getting good 3D prints is that, but I don't know why I'm talking about a topic I know very little about. Let's see. Pitting comes from it being removed from supports after curing. Pumps come from being removed from supports before curing, says Valator. So I don't know anything about that. Canoe Crasher took the tour this year. I was told that the 3D printing price is secret. Process, I suspect, is what you mean. They were not releasing much info. Yes, I would suspect so. I mean, it seems like magic to me that, like, I don't know. Okay, it's more than 5 years ago, but I remember a few years ago, like maybe 10, probably not even 10 though. A friend of mine, when 3D printings first started, there was just a couple places like Shapeways that you could get 3D prints, and he ordered these cool 3D printed dice, and so they were like not solid, they were like a frame or a cage kind of thing, and he wanted me to paint them for him. I'm like, yeah, sure. So he gave them to me, and then when I sat down to actually paint them, it was just painful. Like the huge striations, the material was very porous almost. And I'm like, I can't do this. Everything's at too many angles. There's just too much. Like there's no way that I could have prepared this to my satisfaction. Even using the sealer, which I think I maybe did a little bit of, or I thought about doing, it was just too much. Like it wouldn't have filled it all in, and I'd have spent my whole life trying to do it with putty or scraping or something else. And then my friend does not care on that level. He just wants them to be a color and look cool. He's not going to take close-up photographs of them and submit them to a miniature painting contest. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to, live with the pain and do this and then never get anything 3D printed. So this was like 8 or 10 years ago, and now they can do them in a massive brick where I, a miniature preparation snob, am pretty happy about it. Like I really don't. I've painted them. I started painting the 3D Masters that Reaper did, years ago. They bought some 3D printers for to print out masters of the things that the sculptors who do it digitally make. And I thought those were pretty great. A little breakable. These seem much less breakable. But, in terms of is this a lot like resin and nice and smooth and stuff? Yeah, there'd be a couple little spots like this. And that'd be it. And now they're able to do it on like a consumer level and mass make them, where everybody is essentially getting what I was happy to get as a master. So a master is like, if we take something that Green Users made, Bob and Julie, they're making a physical thing. So this would be made out of putty. And there's just one. And they send it into Reaper. And then they make a master mold. So the first master mold just has one because there's only one guy to mold. But they will cast a few of those. Those are the master casts. That's as close to the original as it can look. It's not going to have a lot of mold lines. It's not going to be smushed, or sometimes the molds can kind of compress things a little bit, so this guy would be skinnier, say, if he wouldn't be molded like that probably, but let's just pretend if he was molded where the two halves of the mold were like that, you could get it where it compressed things and he was skinnier. And that's why sometimes if you've got a multi-part miniature, the arm doesn't necessarily fit into the cavity in the same way as you would expect. It's one side or the other may have been slightly compressed or offset or something. So those are masters. And that's one of the nice things about painting for companies like Reaper, is that sometimes you get to work on those very fresh, almost perfect miniatures. And before Reaper was making these mass market 3D prints, they would either in-house or send out for a 3D print or a resin copy if it was a physical thing or something very large. And we would get those to paint sometimes. Largely because, you know, if it was something that was to be made into Bones or Bones Black, it doesn't exist yet in those things. Like, if they want me to paint it in time for the Kickstarter, the point of the Kickstarter is to fund the production of those things. So you have to figure out a way to make at least one or two to show everybody and get some painted. So that is why I was occasionally painting 3D Masters. And now everybody can. So there's a little bit of pitting there. That's probably the one pit that I would say that I've noticed. And it is on the base rim, so I'm going to choose not to care. Because I am thinking of doing some basing on him where that part would just get, you know, buried in something else. Knowledge says 5 or 6 years ago, resin printing got cheap enough to do at home. Yeah, so we didn't really see that coming, and then that happened. But the things people were making at home were like the dice that my friend had, and then professional companies started having these nicer quality printers. And now people at home can do pretty amazing things, and Reaper can make 100 of these guys at a time. I don't know if it's 100. Again, I don't really know anything about the process, but you could see that it was a bunch in that one thing. So I think Mako's pretty close to ready to go too. So there's a line across this, and that is a crack that Jason has sculpted, I think, going through the old dry wood that this guy would be made of. So I think he's good enough. I'm going to move this for a minute. And then this is the other step that I like to do in cleaning any miniature. So I used to wash them with dish soap and scrub them with a toothbrush. And then I tried this, and I'm like, this works even better. And this works really well on the softer plastic, too. The Bones Black and the Bones USA. It makes the paint stick better. It is important for metal miniatures because there could be mold release, like actual little powder on them. And also, you know, genuinely cast resin miniatures where they're coming out of a mold also could have mold release powder on them. And then, you know, whoever packaged this guy grabs him out of a bin, and maybe they're grabbing him out of a bin after lunch, and they've had a sandwich, and their hands are a little greasy. And then I get excited, and I open the blister straight away, and my hands are maybe a little greasy because I put a lot of hand cream on or whatever. So there could be residue on here. There's the dust. If I've left this on my shelf, there's more dust. So I dip them. This is drugstore isopropyl, so the 70, 90, is it 90? I think it's 91%. And I'll do a whole bunch of these guys at a time if I have to, like if I'm doing class miniatures. And then I will just get some paper towel. Because it evaporates pretty quickly. So, I mean, they take a minute to dry, but they don't take forever. And put them on there. But they will need to have all that evaporate off before I go on to prime them. So now I will do something else instead. That actually took much less time than I thought. I'm so used to prepping miniatures being a whole thing. But that is very white and shiny. So I reuse the paper towel is why it looks weird. I'm like, why not just reuse it over and over again? If that is all it is doing in life. Now my problem is running out of room. Hold on, I'll just slide over here for a minute. So what is the other thing that I wanted to work on today? And that is testing colors for something. So I cannot tell you what I'm testing colors for. I would say feel free to make guesses if you want. I will neither confirm nor deny, but you can make guesses here on the record, and then, you know, in a few weeks, we can look back and you can claim your victory if you were correct. So I was asked to do, this is test goblin from the Quick Paint Goblin Kit. But I had painted a set of goblins in a similar, fancier way for the Kickstarter. Which I guess would be 5, not 6, I think. I'm going to go ahead and say 5. I don't know. I don't really keep track of that. So I was asked to make a color that's kind of like this, but a darker, richer version. So I had to figure out where I put this guy. The reason I have this one is when I'm doing something like a Learn to Paint kit or those quick paint kits, I need to test if my idea works. Like, do the colors look okay? Are the steps of, you add 2 drops of this, 1 drop of that, does that all work? So I do a test one before I do the real ones, and I make notes, and then if the colors didn't work, I go pick some different colors, which is, Gel Tip was wrong. They are alpha sanding needles. The camera makes it larger, so I just assumed mine were smaller. Well, I guess I'm glad, am I, that the camera is showing things in that much detail. I don't know if I'm going to be glad that they're showing this guy in that much detail. But that idea of testing stuff, and this came up with several people that I talked to at ReaperCon this year in classes, and I think maybe even outside of classes. But I know people, particularly if you're coming at miniature painting and you're not a particularly artistic person, you're a computer programmer, an engineer, or any of the other professions that are very common amongst our people. If you don't know a lot about art or the artistic process, I think there's this tendency to believe that artistic people just know how to do a bunch of things that you don't, whether through training or innate talent, which is not a thing I believe in, so let's say through training, that if they have this color, which was, goblin skin for goblins, Ron made goblin skin, and that's because he believes that's what color goblin should be. And I would just know what color to use to shade this. Because that's the kind of question you'll see a lot on forums or probably in the Discord, Facebook groups. It's like, I want to paint something this red. What color should I use to shade it? What color should I use to highlight it? What goes with it? I made this demon that has this red skin. Now, what color what paint color should I buy to make his clothes look right? And there's a lot of other questions that are kind of like that. And the answer is not that the people who are more experienced or whose work you admire more or whatever just know what they're doing. Sure, sometimes. The answer is that we're willing to sit down and test. And once I realized that I was willing to take some time to play around with some stuff to figure out what is the best color to shade this and what color looks good on the clothing or whatever. Like, it improved my painting a lot, and it also made the process less frustrating. So the willingness to just experiment, which if you are someone who's like an engineer or a computer programmer or someone else who's in a scientific or analytic, fact-oriented, experimentation is how you learn all that stuff, right? Like, you write some code, you test it, did it work? No? Okay, we go fix it. We figure out what didn't work, and then we make that part work. Art is not some mystical process that is nothing like that. It is a lot like that. Or you think about playing the guitar or whatever. You got to play that song a bunch of times and suck before you play it correctly. So I want to test a few color options. A lot of the colors I got out are similar to this, but I was careful to use browns that had a bit of red in them instead of, reddish colors on this guy so that it didn't go too red. So I kind of want to do the opposite of that now. I think I may still want to start here. I don't know if I want to mix these two, or I think this is going to be too dull if I mix these two, but I think that's kind of the thing I want to try. And then go down with more reds. This is Auburn Shadow. This is Mahogany Brown. And then if I really want deep shadows, so Requiem Red is so hard to say. Requiem Requiem Red, there, you can just read it, is one of the colors in Kickstarter 6. So this bottle looks funky because it was like a sample color that the people in the paint department made up to allow some of us to test with while we were visiting at Reaper. And then I had used this in the highlights on this guy. And I love this color for this kind of thing. It's nice and rich. It's kind of transparent, so you don't have to worry so much about skin things. And I don't know that if I need highlights that are higher, you could just mix a little yellow into white, but I grabbed that. So I have 2 of these little dudes. I thought I had 2 little dudes. Where's the second little dude? Well, how have I lost one? All right, I am going to probably make moving around noises just for a minute while I try to figure out what I did with my little guy. Like, I remember getting him out. So weird. So I don't think he's in this bag, which actually I had this giant bag, and I'll show this later because I'm sure there will be a moment where paint is drying of, you know, things that I've just tested, so I can kind of give you examples of the just testing. Oh, they're right here. Huh. You guys are probably sitting there going, hello, dum-dum. They're right there. All right, so I did not shake the paints the way I usually do before the show. I'm going to try doing it off to the side. And if that's super obnoxious, someone say in chat, and I will mute down as I need to do that. But since it's now on a different table, I don't think it shakes anything too much, so there's at least that. So I can do some testing here just on the palette even, but dried paint and the process of painting can be different experiences. So I don't always rely on that or doing paper tests. I probably do need, all right, pardon my itchy arm. Probably do need some brushes. Maybe should have thought about that before the show. I have my brushes always off to the side. Okay, all of my brushes? No. I have the brushes I use most frequently off to the side. I need a mixing brush though. And that's how you can tell it's the mixing brush because it has been very abused. When I was at Reaper, we spent a couple days in the store, and I think, if you just scroll up a little in the chat, Queenie shared some information about the Reaper Paint Club at the store. I think it's actually Saturdays and Sundays now, which is pretty cool. But there are some brushes and rinse cups and stuff like that there for people's use, which is nice. But if you ever want to see sad brushes, something like Paint Club or Paint and Take is the place to go. And so there are these cups of sad brushes, and I'm like, I'm going to take a picture in case I ever need that for, a thumbnail for a video or... one of my blog articles, if I ever write those again. Try it. So this color is oiled leather, which is an orangey brown. At least in my mind, it's an orangey brown. So it's a much duller orange than the Goblin, of course. So, but I don't want totally dull, because I wanted richer and a little redder. So I'm trying to figure out if this is just that side of red. We want to make sure it's orange. I feel like those are my 2 options. Now, normally, if I were kind of picking on my own basis for skin colors, I often tend to go a little duller. So if somebody says it's orange skin, I think about, well, we talk about people being yellow and red and pink and black, and it's all shades of brown and tan. So it's all desaturated versions of those colors. So I try to think about, all right, if somebody's blue, what's like a desaturated version of that? If I'm trying to paint a very naturalistic kind of look. But a lot of the things we're painting are fantasy. So sometimes it's fun to kind of go. I know these are kobolds, they're not goblins. Because the other thing about testing is the overthinking it thing. But I'm just going to paint a little bit. I feel like that's orange. Paint a little bit so that we can get the paint drying, and then I will yammer some more. Okay, apparently that brush is having some problems. And this is why I wear particular shirts for painting, because now I have an orange shirt. I'm just trying to get a little bit off it because I do like this shirt a lot, actually. This is my Brine Wind Parrot and Patch, one of the taverns from the Brine Wind setting. All right, so I'm gonna put that brush somewhere else so I won't be tempted to use it again, and try a different one. I think I knew I had a brush that was doing that, and I set it aside to glue, and then I forgot and put it back in the pool. The figure that I have to paint doesn't have a ton of exposed skin, so I'm not going to bother with the legs. But so back in the, we were talking about the days of metal. Back in the day, so prep would include, you had to get all the mold lines off, you had to deal with that pitting. If you wanted something to look good, you had to do a bunch of stuff. So there's a cost investment with buying a miniature, but there's also a time investment if you want to paint it a particular way. So if I was going to do a test with something, I would kind of feel like I had to do all that and then finish the miniature. Like there's just this idea that if you weren't painting towards the goal of having a completed miniature, you were wasting time. So even if it was a test, I would just be getting something that I didn't care as much about and paint it up or practice or whatever. And then, at least in theory, finish it up later. And that seems efficient and everything, like, it's not wasteful. But it can also make you be a little too precious or hold you back on your willingness to do this testing thing that I've talked about. So bones were like, yeah, I'm happy to have bones for gaming and transporting miniatures that are light and all of the various things that the point of bones was. But for me, one of the coolest things about bones was it just freed up that pressure and made testing so much more, made me so much more willing to test. Because I could just grab a guy, wash it, and start painting. I didn't have to prime. If I didn't have to prime them, maybe it was okay not to worry about the mold lines. And then, okay, so I didn't finish it. It was just a little plastic guy. It wasn't the end of the world. Or I could just throw it in simple green and paint it again later. So where I used to have like a handful of test miniatures, that something had gone wrong in the painting process or something, and I was never going to finish them, so I just kept them around for testing. There was Test Elf, was one of them. Now I could find miniatures that in some way matched what I was trying to paint. So if I was trying to paint a particular robe, I could find something else that had those kinds of folds. So I could test the technique on those kinds of folds. And I'll show you a couple of those while we wait for the paint to dry. So this is the mix with, that's like part goblin skin and part oiled leather. And this is the mix that is part goblin skin and part rust brown. And I think I'm liking that one better. This one still seems kind of close to... It's more vivid, and obviously we haven't done the shading and the highlighting yet, so we don't know how it's going to look. But, nope, see, I don't know. This is why I'm doing a test, because I don't know which one I will like better. And if I have a physical test, I can also show the person who made this request and see what they think. Definitely you want to do stuff like this if you're going to paint a whole bunch of guys. Like I was painting 9 of these goblins, I think. I wanted to know what colors I wanted before I got in there. So this is an example of what I was talking about with the shapes of objects. So I saw this style of painting where you're kind of doing a very soft fur just with brush strokes. And the example I saw, the folds were like this. So they went, you know, I don't know the name. There's a name for all the different kinds of clothing folds. I don't know that one. Here, her dress has it actually. So the item that I saw it painted on was like this. The item I wanted to paint was like this, like a totally different kind of cloth. So I'm like, will it work? It is part of the reason that it looks cool on that thing that I saw, the shape. So this is not the finished object. If you've ever seen the Frost Giant lady that I painted, the back of her cloak has this like times 5 hours of my life. But I wanted, before I spent those 5 hours, I took 10 minutes and tested the concept. So I took the colors I was using, I took the brushes I thought would work, I tested out the idea. I'm like, yeah, this is enough of proof of concept for me to go ahead and do it on the real thing. What else did I keep out here? This was, people were talking about how you can use complementary colors to shade one another. So the complementary color of orange is blue. So what would happen if you just took straight up blue? So I didn't mix anything in. I just used really thin down blue and used it to shade this. And it's kind of weird, but it does work. Mixing it in and having a slightly, different proportion between the orange and the blue would probably work better. But it works. That same blue also worked all right to shade this green. And then I had a different miniature that I wanted to do texture on, and I just kind of wanted to test the colors that I was going to use. I wanted it to be visible, but not like super visible, the texture. And that was, what is her name? She's the lady, she's holding a little dragonette. Tristan? I think Tristan the Lore Mistress. That was the anniversary edition of Tristan the Lore Mistress that I painted that way. And then I showed her to you all recently, I think, because I did like a tabletop version for the Learn to Paint kit in the Bones 5. So I was comparing the pictures, I think. Anyway, that's what that was. And then I have a whole bag of stuff like this. Some of these are pieces because they were demos for conversions or something. So this, I think, was me testing the super washes when they first came out. So I just kind of wanted to play around and get different colors. I didn't want to have to paint a whole guy. I don't think that was me. Some of these may be from various paint and take things as well. So this was me showing people how you do dry brushing and washing at the paint club I used to go to. So Pippi Longstocking Wolf here. Allender's Red has a set of hardware drawers still filled with Bones 5. Yeah, that's it. So don't worry about those miniatures you get in something like Bones that you don't love. It's fine. You can find things to do with them. So Pippi Longstocking Wolf, I had to paint a personified version of my cat Corbin, who is an orange tabby, and I wanted to kind of test how orange. I felt like I needed to exaggerate his orangeness a little because he's actually somewhat muted for an orange cat. So this is probably closer to what he really looks like. But I tested some other things. There's me practicing the tabby M on the forehead. So I was testing some other colors before I did it on the real miniature. Which then I did blend it in and do all that stuff. But before doing, it's good if you can figure out whether you like something before you do all that. It is better. This was every few years I want to be very tropical, and I'll do a test miniature and I'll realize maybe I don't really want to be as tropical as I thought I did. So I get it out of my system before I do like a real figure. The tests that are like kind of especially useful, I've actually kept because I do teach and share examples with people and stuff like that. If I weren't doing that, I might just throw some of these away or strip them and give them to kids or something like that. This guy was practicing freehand, so you need to find surfaces that are similar size and shape. So I think it was a book, so I was considering each quadrant of the shield to be like a book. I'm trying to remember. I think I was trying to see if I could actually do like recognizable word titles or something, and I think in the end I did not because of the positioning of the book. But if trying to do this on paper, it wouldn't have been the same at all. I needed to have a painted surface that would be similar, similar color, and then similar paint that I would be using over it to really compare what I'm getting. Paper is porous. You're not going to get the same look. I have a couple others of these that I think I did keep somewhere else, but when I was working on the Zeba, the female Efreet, that was like a lot of miniature, and so I definitely did some color tests, and then I think I even did an airbrush test. And I had a couple of little dragonettes or something, and I would do the airbrush step on them first and then do it on the real figure if I liked it. And there was a point where I was like, okay, now I think it's starting to look chalky. I want to go from hand, by hand from here. Oh, these were skin tests for the Succubi in Bones 5, I think, weren't they? I ended up going with the skin like this, but I tested a reddier one as well. Well, I did 3 different skin tones, but they were all kind of, there was like a light, medium, and dark version of stuff like that. Wings. This was that I've painted on stream. There's an Agendra Snake Man. So I did the dry brushing and washing, and then we talked about how you can add a few extra shadows, and then on another time I did the metallics and stuff. I originally worked up that color scheme for the Reaper Virtual Expo, I think it was. So I was going to do an online class, and I wanted to, test my colors beforehand, and which wash did I like the best for each of these. So like this is, too much. That's too dark. It covered up too much of the underlying surface. This one was too light. So I always like to have some kind of wings. I have the wings from the Griffin. I have several of those that I use for testing stuff like that. Because you really, it's so useful to have a surface that's very similar to the one you're going to be painting to test. Like if I had tested that on her dress, I would not have been able to tell as well if it worked or not. This, I think, what is that? I mean, I feel like I want to say that was, no, see, I don't think that was for that. This may have just been me goofing around. Maybe I even did this on stream and you're all like, don't you remember that time? And apparently I do not. So don't be afraid to mess around with stuff. And if, miniatures are really resources that you don't have a lot of, you can strip them. You can still do the tests and you can strip them, or buy some army men. Go to Goodwill, look for board games that have a bunch of miniatures in them. I see people making amazing Goodwill finds of board games all the time online. My husband is kind of emotionally scarred from his mom dragging him to thrift stores, so he will very rarely accompany me to a thrift store. But I don't know that we're the people who have that kind of luck. Who would look, I found this amazing game for $5. I see posts like this all the time. But you can get them on discount sometimes on online stores or local stores. Just kids' figures, anything that's miniature-esque is going to work the same way for testing purposes. So what I like about this is that the coverage is pretty good. That's convenient for me. The coverage is less amazing on this, but it may be more like the color. I do have a picture of an example, but it is a copyrighted picture, so I'll not be showing it on stream. Also, it would kind of be more than a clue of what I'm doing. It would pretty much just say straight up what I'm doing. I'm supposed to not be telling you and just letting you guess. In an ideal world, I would let this dry, but in a testing world, I would probably be doing the same thing I'm doing here, or using a hairdryer to speed it up. I bet I still have my hairdryer sign somewhere. His little tongue cracks me up. All right, so how are my guys doing with drawing? Pretty good, I think. She didn't feel 100% dry. Give her just a minute more, I think. All right, well, I'm thinking I can go on to working on some shades. Well, Under the Red has been using super washes for painting plaids, which is an interesting idea that I don't think I can visualize exactly. And Daka Flocka Flame has joined us. I'm gonna test the darker and the lighter color. I think that it's probably not gonna be massively different. But this side, I have to be careful that I don't get a shadow color that's way more saturated than the, I think I got water in there, than the original color, because having shadows that are a lot more saturated than your midtones or highlights can kind of do this weird thing where things don't recess enough. Now, I can fix it if I end up doing that. I'm not going to sweat it too much and just add another step. But it's worth checking while I'm here. And then sometimes I might get a better look just going straight into the darker one. I don't know if it's massively different, but I feel like I actually do like just mix with the darker one better. Yeah, it feels richer somehow. Let's try this side. Just mix with the darker one. Yeah, I feel like I like it better there too. So I know that I don't really want to use Auburn Shadow. It's a nice color, but it's not for today. And I just want to mix my shadows with Mahogany Brown. And then I have my difficult to say if I want to go even darker. This is a very dull red. But I also did not shake it enough, I can tell, because just there was too much clear gunk at the beginning. So I will try again. And I liked this dark red because it is just a little purple. I consider just going straight to a purple. Or my old buddy Blue Liner, which, because it's orange and blue, would probably also work. But I feel like my example kind of had a nice reddish thing going on in the shadows, so I want to do that. And yep, it looks like dark reddish brown in context. So if they ever dry, I think I know what I want to do. In the meantime, I can start priming these other two. Well, it's just priming. I'll worry about what angle her face is at later. So, anyone else out there like completely obsessed with Baldur's Gate 3 or just me? Actually, I was thinking probably anyone who's watching this isn't obsessed, or you would just be like, go play it right now and not watching me yammer on. Because that's what I do a lot of the time. But I could be wrong. Maybe you like to play multiplayer and your multiplayer people are not currently available. So I am definitely gonna shake these. I'm gonna use the gray. I'm pretty much a gray primer person. If I use the metallics on the Rael, I might end up putting down a base of matte color anyway. Gel tip, I'm pretty much just obsessed in general. Like with everything, just that game. Babatuk is way through the first two. Oh my gosh. I thought about that and then I'm like, I will never play this game if I wait to do that. I should have been doing it while it was in the open access beta thing. Because I was like, well, I'm not going to play that. I don't want to play the same part over and over again. Unlike my husband, who totally has played some parts over and over and over again. And then he's still starting multiple characters. It's like, oh my gosh, you did not get that out of your system. Docket Flock of Flame, pretty much just tabletop for me these days. One of the things that's cool about it is how much it is like a real game. I mean, obviously it's not exactly the same and there's not human interaction. I mean, there can be. You can play with 3 other friends, up to 3 other friends, but there's not the DM thing. But it's just so flexible in terms of, like, you can shoot things down from the ceiling to fall on guys, or shoot statues down, or like move some barrels of alcohol around, and then you light things on fire, and like the guys go on fire and stuff. There's just a lot of different ways to solve problems. You can talk your way out of situations. You can disguise yourself. There's just all kinds of different ways to deal with the various things that are happening in the game. Babatuk, not that they're really related, but my laptop sucks. So we actually have Macs, and this game is releasing on Mac, but a very great many of games do not. So what my husband decided to do, and at first I thought he was crazy, but I'm now on board with him, is he got a Steam Deck from Steam. So it's like a Switch, but it's like a little mini computer. And then you can hook it up to monitors and stuff if you want to see things bigger. He's even figured out a way to hook it up to our TV if we want to see things very big. And it's nice because then I can do all the Humble Bundles and get super cheap games, and there are a lot of like little puzzle games and stuff I can just sit on my easy chair and play on the device. Or if we have something like this where you actually want it to look pretty cool, you can hook it up to a monitor and play that way. So I thought he was just being, his techno obsessed self, always into the cool new things. But he ended up convincing me that if I'm not going to have a PC, this is like a better answer than having a laptop or something for gaming purposes. I just use my iPad for everything else. Like email and stuff like that if I'm traveling. Those are some deep crevices, which the nice thing about brush priming is it also kind of gives you a preview of the physical experience of painting the miniature. So like I know now that I need to get in these spots before I paint out here. Like I might have figured that out, but if you've been watching a while, you know that I might not have. And will I remember this next week? Probably not. So one thing that I'm seeing here is because this is a very textured surface and I'm impatient and painting fast, that I'm getting a lot of little bubbles, which is how you can add pitting. If anyone's wondering how you add pitting to miniatures, this is how. But you can avoid it with my old buddy, the compressed air again. So I don't press all the way down, just enough to pop the bubbles. Because if I start blowing on it, get lightheaded and stuff. Gel tip obsessions depend on what it is. Since I'm not playing games right now, I'm not obsessed with that, but when I get into games, I'm all in. Right now is obsessed with painting, and they haven't got into Baldur's Gate, and that is probably good. I need to start being more balanced, because I like, for a while I wasn't really playing video games or doing anything like that. And I'm glad that I went back, especially if you're going to buy all this stuff at some point, you kind of want to feel like you're using it and not wasting all your money. But like you, I have trouble focusing on too many things at the same time. So I'll tend to do a whole bunch of one thing and not very much others. But it is my dream. It is my futile ADHD dream to be a balanced person who can do multiple things with their brain. Not at the same time, but like over a span of time. It's not just like I spent this week doing X, because that's what my life is normally like. There's X, and then there's whatever bare minimum is needed for life maintenance, and all the other things languish in the shadows. So apart from that bubble thing, I am not too precious when I brush prime. I'll look for pooling or something. I don't want to add texture. That is my main goal. And if this were, for Rael, I'll probably add a little water to this paint and thin it down. Since she is a person with fine detail. I'm not bothering about the base because I continue to nurture the dream that I will do cool base things on him. Not super cool. I was just saying kind of like what I did with what's her name? The Thingy Mermaid, the Drunken Mermaid figure that I did a couple years ago for ReaperCon. I have like tiny little wheel shells and a few other things. There's this stuff called star sand, and it's little. I think they're diatoms. I don't know. They're little creatures, but if you look at them like at our scale, it looks like little crabs and things. So they're just like so tiny that you probably need a magnifier to look at it if you're not, looking closely at them. But for our purposes, if you pick out like individual coolest ones and put them on something meant to look like sand, it'll look like little sea creatures. Because when you go to the store, even if you get like the little shells at the craft store, when you get home, then they will, and you have them next to a miniature, they will seem a lot less little, unless you've got something like, that larger figure we were talking about that Christine makes. Although I guess since her minis are 3D, they can be printed at whatever size you so wish. So there's a little bit I didn't get out of the corner, and I'm just going to assume that shading can take care of that. How are these guys doing? And where are we time-wise? Okay, we're not too bad. I am going to continue with the priming for just a minute. But work on Rael. Yeah, the blowing the bubbles thing was very helpful to me. Because you can just look at the thing and try to pop all the bubbles with the tip of your brush or something. But first of all, I would probably never see them all. And second of all, the paint would be dry before I got to all the bubbles on something. So the letting it just dry enough that you're not going to blow it around, and then using the compressed air at low pressure, I have found very helpful. If you are someone who always has an airbrush set up, you can do the same thing with the airbrush. Babatuk 4 says AD&D rules make my head hurt. Was it AD&D or was it second edition for the Baldur's Gate 1? I feel like it was second edition. I'm impressed. That is one of the things I was wondering about the game. Like, if you don't know anything about D&D rules and you start playing this game, are you just like completely like, what is happening? Or like the tool tips and how they introduce you. I mean, I can't. That's one of those things like I can't pretend I don't know all the rule stuff I know, which even I would have said is not much, because I'm very much these days the kind of person who's like, yeah, I'll just say I want to do this, and the DM can tell me I need to roll that, and it's cool. I'm mostly just using the reference thing to know, okay, here's like roughly the kinds of things that I have abilities to do. Does it seem like one of those fits? So it was kind of like the D&D movie, where when we went to that, we're like, I feel like this would be accessible to people who don't really know anything about Dungeons and Dragons, but there's like no way we could really know, because we are people who know a lot about Dungeons and Dragons. And I did hear from a lot of people that the movie is accessible. Like, our neighbors have watched it, and they are not geeky people at all. Like, they like a lot of sci-fi movies and stuff like that. Like, they like Guardians of the Galaxy and Star Wars and things like that, but they don't have much experience with the wider world of geek things. And they love the Dungeons and Dragons movies. I think they've watched it more than we have at this point. And we went to see it at the theater like 3 times. And I have not forgotten. I almost brought that over as something to work on. That owlbear that I was painting when I was first talking about the D&D movie. I realized I was all like, oh, I should do blah, blah, blah with the owlbear. And I'm like, oh, crap, I keep forgetting that there's this like one section to paint. And I kind of want to do a little experiment with that. But since this mini and the tiki are more topical as new purchases and things people might want to check out, I thought it would be better to focus on them. And she definitely has enough little crevices and details that I'm going to be hitting her with the spritz. And I should be making mental notes about which parts to paint first, because it is the 3D printing allows for some poses that you would not easily get as one piece, at least, on a regular miniature. And sometimes when things are multiple pieces, I will paint parts before assembly. It is not my preference. It is my preference to assemble things if I can, but the can I reach it is the big component there. Let's see. I think Brawl B Gem is confirming that Baldur's Gate was second edition, which, as Babatuk points out, is still Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. I'm with Copperhand. I think it's because it's the one that I played the most when I first started. I still am very sentimental about it. Not that I didn't play other, so I started with the basic materials, with the red box, but I could not get my friends to play more than once. So I would badger them into playing once, and then they would be like, no. I mean, I'm a bad DM, but I think it was just the friends I had at the time. That was not what they were into, and I tried to join the D&D club at school, and they said they were full. Is this because I was actually a girl? I do not know. I kind of got that impression, but I was not confident enough to push the issue. So I really didn't get to play until I was in college, and then when I was in college, second edition had come out. So that is what I got. Although the one game that I was in the most was, like, this was a real hodgepodge first edition, second edition, homebrew type of thing. But for the friends that I found then that I wanted to run through, I used just kind of standard second edition. Then I was in another, like a from scratch homebrew for a while. Like, he used playing cards and all kinds of stuff that was totally not at all like D&D, and his own world and everything. But eventually I think he wanted to do something else, and he did like modified third edition. Well, then we did Legend of the Five Rings, 5 rings? It's 5 rings, right? I don't know. I think it was 5 rings. But I liked third well enough when it came out. Not quite the same nostalgia, but I liked it. I liked the explosion of options. People were interested in stuff. But then I moved to get married, and my husband didn't know anyone who was playing. So we ended up like not playing for quite a while. And then 4th edition came out, and I did not love 4th. I will say. All my board gaming friends liked it, which I think says something kind of about the rule structure. But I felt like my husband says the DM's guide is amazing, and it has a lot of great advice, but I felt like the player situation and just the way the rules were was the opposite, and it was very unfriendly for new players, because everything was combat oriented, and I played a bard. I'm a bard, like my whole thing should be doing stuff out of combat, maybe. So I would just be like, all right, the rule says I can do this in combat. Can I do this other thing to, persuade the king or whatever out of combat? And my husband has no problem dealing with that kind of thing. But I feel like people who were, if that was their introduction to role playing and they weren't confident enough, either as a player or a GM, that was not. It didn't have enough about role playing in the role playing game, I guess is what I'm saying. So I'm much happier with 5th edition. I think maybe I feel like skills are a little too grouped together, but I mean, that's a pretty minor complaint. And overall, I think the group of people you play with, and especially the game master, makes a lot more difference than the system for me. Now, setting and that kind of stuff makes more difference to me, I guess, than the rules. All right, it's time to spritz again, I think. May have thinned just a little too much, but let's see. Copperhand could not get in 4th edition as well. Babatuk, 4th has gone through a real evaluation recently. Under the Skin 13. Yes, this is brush on primer. I am using where did it go? So Reaper makes it in 3 different colors. White, black, and gray, and I'm a gray primer kind of person, so I go with the gray. I would mix gray primer before such an easy option was available. So the thing I like about brush primer is I can do it on stream. Is one thing, I can't spray noxious fumes on stream. But even if I could do that, I'm sure that it is far too humid where I live currently, because we have a whole three or 4 days when it's good to spray product for the humidity. So I kind of got used to brush on primer. Under the Skin 13, do I personally recommend primer even with Reaper's new paint ready plastic? Which plastic? So Reaper now has 4 different plastics. I do not prime, and I do not recommend priming the Bones Classic or the Bones Black. So those are the softer, bendier plastics. They don't need it. So spray primer especially, I'm like, absolutely not. Don't do spray primer. Brush on primer, in my testing, I did not find that the paint adhered any better with this step than just going straight to paint, like unthinned paint out of the bottle. So for time-saving purposes and ease, I don't bother with this step. This isn't going to hurt it if you use brush on primer, but you also don't need to do it. This particular figure is one of Reaper's 3D printed miniatures, and then there's also Bones USA, which is a different kind of plastic. It's more like a resin. So both of these are resin. So I think when you're saying the new darkish gray plastic, I think that is probably Bones USA. And I have painted straight onto it, and it's worked fine. But I've found with a couple of miniatures I was getting a little more rub off than I would expect with the original or Bones Black. So I think if you want a very sturdy paint job, that I would recommend priming the Bones USA. And the packaging should indicate which of the materials it is when you purchase them. Let me see if I got a package handy. I think, now the ones I have are handy, are from the convention that just happened, so they may just be, so this actually is the Bones USA. Looks like that on the bottom, and it will say USA, I think, usually. And if I just really wanted to paint this right away, I would just go ahead and paint it. And I have painted plenty of these without primer. But if I could take the time, or I wanted to have it last on the table for a long time, I would prime it. But I would definitely, if you came in a little later, you missed the step where I dipped these in isopropyl alcohol. So I've poured mine into like a Tupperware style thing. Okay, a Rubbermaid. It's not actually Tupperware. Food storage container. I don't know what the generic term is. And I dip every kind of miniature in there. Metal, plastic, whatever. To make sure that it doesn't have grease or mold residue or dust from sitting on my shelf or anything else on it. I always clean them. Dish soap and scrubbing it with the toothbrush works as well. It's just that the alcohol is like really quick and convenient, and definitely will be stripping off all grease and stuff. So, and it helps the adhesion with the softer plastics as well. All right, so I am going to go ahead and prime her base because I don't have any ideas for something special I would like to do. And that way, if I change my mind, it won't make much of a difference. But if I don't change my mind, the base will be ready to paint. So I'll be working on one or the other of these next week. So I prepped up, this is Rael Rainfeather, who is currently available. And this is Mako the Tiki Shark, also currently available. This one is a fundraising miniature, if anyone came in later. So I think $7.50 of each pack that you purchase goes directly to Maui wildfire fundraising efforts. This is the mini of the month, so with a certain amount of minimum purchase on the Reaper website, you will just get this for free, or you can buy one if you want. But with her, I want to try the, what do you do with my little paint cards? Some of the paints from the ReaperCon thing. So the remainder of the ReaperCon swag bag paints are up for sale on the site right now, which includes these 3 very pretty colored metallics. And I think I want to try using some of those on her dress and talk about how you can use metallic paints and colored metallic paints in particular for things other than swords and armor and whatnot. Babatuk, if you use paints other than Reaper, you may want to prime with Even Bones Classic Black, but obviously no spray primer. I admittedly, the vast majority of my collection of paints is Reaper. I did like some very minor testing with a few other brands. Didn't notice a huge difference, but I don't have a lot of Viejo paint. I do think that I've heard a lot of people say that the model color is not great for adhesion. Like, I've heard that for years and years and years. People painting display even, not just people painting for games and whatnot. It's not my preferred paint for different reasons. Like, I don't think it's horrible or anything. But there's kind of multiple things that they can make the base of an acrylic paint out of, the medium part. And I prefer the feel of one kind over the other. And the one I don't like is what they make Viejo out of. So that's like a personal thing. Oh, that's the color I said I wasn't using. Yeah. All right, well, here we are. I guess I can mix my original color again. No, that one's too dark. I did want the mahogany brown. So I think I'm fine, actually. Yeah, I'm fine. That's the mahogany brown. All right. Paint the orangier guy first. Quindy has popped links into the chat for the 2 miniatures and the ReaperCon Triad. The 12-pack of paint was my other card, and that is currently only available in the Barrowgate box, which also has a lot of cool minis and things. And if you want to watch last week's video on demand, you can see more about that. So since this is a test, I need to remind myself on a few different levels not to get too precious about it. Because earlier this morning, I was like running around trying to figure out a miniature I could use to do this test, and I was overthinking it. Because every now and then I have to remind myself of all the things I tell you all as well. And that was that it's just a test. I don't have to paint something that I can use again later. I can just paint a test. It doesn't have to be an amazing miniature that we're going to finish up on a different stream. If you want miniatures from beginning to end, fully finished process, then you will enjoy Anne's stream, which is every day starting at, I'm going to say 11:30, and Quindy will correct us if I'm wrong. But I tend to bop around and do different things, and I don't always finish a miniature. On stream, I mean, in real life, I do occasionally finish a miniature. And honestly, I want to finish some of the stuff that I've done on stream. It bothers me to have this many things that are incomplete on my shelf. I don't think of it as a shelf of shame, but I don't like it to be like a groaning pile of stuff that's almost done and is worth finishing, but I never get back to. So that's why I've been doing, going back to some of those projects, like the brain guy. Elder Brain? No. I will literally never remember the name of that miniature. But we finally finished him up, and I do want to finish the owlbear. because going back to my obsession of Baldur's Gate, there is an owlbear. There are events that can transpire related to the owlbear, and I'm a druid, so I can now be an owlbear. This is very recent. I just got to 6th level, and I was like, well, I left those guys over there and was wrestling with, like, do I go back and wipe them out? Like, I think they're evil, so I think I should take care of the problem, but I hadn't gotten around to it. And then I'm like, what an amazing way to test how awesome it is to be an owlbear. And since they were, by this time, not intended for people who were 6th level, my owlbear one-shotted them, and it was super satisfying. I mean, she even, like, bounced them. I was like, yes. But more recently, I fought slightly more challenging foes, and my owlbear was not. My owlbear was still good, but that fight did not go well. Like, I was like, all right, do I reload the save? I think I'm just gonna live with it. But this fight could hardly have gone any worse. Like, we were missing rolls. Well, first the problem was, I'm like, oh, look, some people in the distance. I think I should run up and talk to them. And I normally kind of like try to scout a little more. I'm like, I bet they'll know something about this new region that I'm in. And then I walk over and they're like, extremely very hostile. Well, that was an excellent decision that I made there. No regrets. Many, many regrets. But eventually, we prevailed. Mostly. I'm not going to say everyone was totally alive at the end, but it was a solvable problem, so. And then they, like, had crappy treasure, and I was like, what a letdown. But there was knowledge. I appreciate knowledge. Knowledge is usually how the seeking of knowledge is usually how I go astray in role-playing games. Quindy has confirmed that it is 11 a.m. Central Time for Anne's show, where you can watch minis get painted from start to finish, unlike the chaos that happens on this show. Only on Mondays. So at least you only have to deal with one day of chaos. And then, well, I clearly need to go watch more of Luca's show, Miniatures Den, on Wednesdays at, I'm just going to throw out 1:30 Central. Because I don't know if he is more like Anne or more like me or something in between. I don't know. I feel like getting brown enough in places. So this figure, for people who came in late, is a color test. I've been asked to paint something, maybe by Reaper, that I'm not disclosing what it is because I do not think I have authorization to disclose it. And I was asked to paint it a specific color. And I wasn't sure just off the top of my head what set of paint, what collection of paints would be the best option to paint those colors. So I thought I would test it. But I'm testing like a more and a less vivid version. So this is the deeper, reddier, more vivid orange. And he obviously needs some highlights too. So let's see. Straight up goblin skin. 1 p.m.-ish on Wednesdays for Miniatures Den with Luca. He starts right after Anne finishes. He usually paints a figure to completion in 1 to 2 shows, depending on the figure. Anne and I don't do that as well. Well, okay. 2 years in a row now, I've managed to paint the Halloween monochromatic miniature in 1 show. And 2 years is enough to be a tradition in my mind, so I will have to, if anyone has some suggestions, let me know, and I will consider that for the Halloween miniature this year. I mean, maybe Reaper will make something special. That's what I did last year, was they made, what the heck was his name? Casper von Monstein. I just used this guy too for my class at ReaperCon. So I'm going to say Casper von Monstein, the vampire. And I had just seen Werewolf by Night. So thought an old movie, black and white. Genuine monochrome scheme would be fun. But the year before that, I did the Ghost Bride chibi miniature. I think her name is Betty. But that's a special edition figure. They just released that. Or re-released it as a Halloween thing. It's not one of the Bonesylvanians that has been also made in Bones. So I've done like she was like a tealy blue color, I think, to be ghosty. So I'll have to see, maybe we'd have more of a bright green or color. I mean, sepia tone would be interesting, but not especially Halloween-y, I guess. Although the Victorians certainly liked their ghost stories, so maybe I could find some way to rationalize that. Daka Flocka Flame. Do I know if all the ReaperCon stuff that's going to be released is out, or if there's still more stuff that they're going to put up for sale? It depends on which things. So the paints, the setting book, for sure are limited numbers. So the swag bag paints that are out now, that's until it sells out. And if they put out the 12-pack of the paints from the Barrowgate box, that would be the same thing. The setting book is, until the print run that they did runs out. I know that the Arachno Assassin guy that's in the Barrowgate box, that's it. He's in the Barrowgate box. He's a special, memorial miniature. He's not coming out in regular release. As far as I know, all of the other miniatures will eventually. A bunch already are. The mouse thing that I showed you, that's already up. The Sophie's already up. Creed is already up, I think. The ones I don't like, there's no release date yet for the gambling dwarves and the drinking dwarves and the other bar patron worker type characters that were in the Barrowgate box that I was showing last week. I'm sure those will come out, but those I have no idea what the timeline is. But a bunch of stuff is either already out or comes out on the 30th, I think. So now I'm starting to add in the Saffron Sunset, which I also really like for, if I was painting a vivid red colored hair, I like to use this rust brown and then the Saffron Sunset to highlight it. And probably mahogany shade, actually. This is very close to the recipe, or some of the recipes that I have used for doing, bright red hair. I like the actual red hair triad as well, which is Carrot Top is the lighter color, and we had the Auburn that is the darkest color, and I do not remember the name of the one in the middle. And then something with, if I was really trying to do like a more of a strawberry blonde, dulled down kind of red hair, I would probably use that oiled leather that's on the other guy. But I do like to do a pretty flaming redhead now and then. It's fun. And Saffron Sunset is my secret sauce on that one. We're doing the highlights. We'll go straight saffron. And one of the reasons I like working with this for that kind of thing, or recommend it, is I know a lot of times people find paints that are a little bit transparent frustrating, but they make layering a lot easier. So it's like you won't get streaky, crummy blending on your red hair. when you use that. Releasing won't be as challenging. Does he need more highlight? Probably. I still feel like I'm not getting as much shadow as I want. But I'm not sure where else to put it. Oop. Sorry, that wasn't very in focus. I've been like totally out of focus this whole time. Why is it so uncooperative? Is it the lighter colored gray throwing it off? Why don't you want to focus on this guy? And maybe I will just go ahead and use a little bit of the, I picked out Golden Glow, adding whatever yellow to. White would be similar. Anything that's not pure white is going to usually be easier to work with. For all be gem, we all wish we had Lucas Tabletop skill and speed. I know I do. Yeah, I am slow at a great many things, so I'm not terribly shocked that I'm slow at miniature painting. But that doesn't mean it doesn't annoy me sometimes, because you're like, oh, I want to paint all the things. Or, you know, maybe it'd be cool if I ever did actually paint some of our games. Like Flamecraft. I want to paint Flamecraft. Super cute dragons. Alright, we're just going to pretend his noses. Orange 2 wouldn't be. In fact, I believe that I have very specific instructions about the nose, if that helps you guess what I'm working on at all. Which I can't say is something that has come up a lot in previous assignments. Maybe this is too bright. I don't know. I also don't know why I'm having problems with my camera today. I thought I had sussed this out. I spent like an hour this morning trying to get the camera to look good, and now it's totally denying me. Is he just too small? Alright, well, that seems like more than enough for a test. He's very orange. He's like a Cheeto. He might be too orange. So let's go over to the less Cheeto version, which is a mix of oiled leather and goblin skin. And all my shades that I mixed before dried up, so we'll have to mix some new ones. Oh, and the little tweezers and stuff that Reaper currently has on the website, I don't think they're going to keep selling that. It seems like something that they did as, you know, part of the Barrowgate box goodies, because they usually have some non-miniature goodies in the special edition boxes. And those things are typically produced by third parties, so it's not really, you know, it's a complication to just provide it on an ongoing basis. Alright, a little higher. Oh, you want a little lower? Dear camera, why? taking stuff out of the frame. See if that helps. Good golly, it wasn't this bad when I was doing the prepping, I don't think, was it? Well, luckily it's just a test, so it's not super important to see exactly what I'm doing. It just would be nice if the camera would cooperate. Better with those eye sockets in. That's an interesting question. If your skin is orange, what color would your tongue be? Like super bright red, I guess? I mean, I'm not going to paint his little tongue because it's not relevant for the figure I'm testing this for, but it's an interesting question to me. Oh, it's killing me with this not focusing. I'm gonna hope it's because it's a little guy and that we can have better luck with Miko or Rael next week. All right. I think these guys look more Dayglow on my screen than they actually are, but they are pretty vivid. Mix just a little more of my middle color, which not with that. With the colors I originally used. And we'll give him the highlight treatment as well. And then we will compare with the original guy that it's supposed to be kind of like, but not exactly. Yeah, I think I might like this one better, even though I thought the other one was like in isolation a nicer color. Like it's the color I use. Something very similar for red hair for the purposes of this guy that I will be painting. I suspect that this combo is going to be more appropriate. I think the other colors in the color scheme are going to be fairly desaturated or neutrals. They're probably going to be dark grays, dark bluey blacks, stuff like that. But the nice thing about having this is even after I make this decision, I'll have this figure if I'm like, then I'm like, oh, well, should I use this brown or this brown? I'll have this there that I can just, quickly throw on another test. And this, if I wasn't on stream, this would be way faster because I would not have to try and paint and talk at the same time, which I am very bad at doing. Luke is probably good at that too. I don't know if maybe I want to be less saturated in the highlights, but I'll stick with the more saturated for now, see how it works. I also can run this by the person who made the request. Now, would I always do that? I would want to know I would do it only with clients that I kind of know if they can extrapolate from a work in progress. Some people cannot. They just see the horribleness and they can't look past the fact that it's a test, so I did not care about missing some places and stuff like that. So there are people that, clients that I prefer not to show things to until they're done, or at least that section is done or whatever. But I have worked with Ron a long time, and I know that he can look past the bits that suck to see the overall thing. And then, in fact, the problem I'm most likely to have with Ron is either I just wander off and make up my own decisions about color and don't realize that this is something he believes to be very specifically colored, or I don't know the classic coloring of something. So I like to check that with him because I don't want to disappoint him any more than I already have with some color choices that I've made, where he's just been like completely baffled by what I did. I'm like, but I looked online and found reference pictures and everything. These are natural creatures usually, and I've just chosen a different color base for that creature than he would have expected. All right, so this is the original coloring, and I think that one is going to be the better choice. I don't know if it's like still too saturated next to that one, but I'll take some pictures and let Ron make the final decision. I don't know which one you like best, just as a color or whatever. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I should start with like a darker version. Well, I will have to consider that and look at my source a little more. But where are we time-wise? Oh, wow. How did I do that? Exactly 5:01. All right, we'll come over here. Thank you all for hanging out with me, giving me company. I know that, so I wanted you to see the color thing to understand. Like I said, a lot of people have this vision that people who are good with color, which I'm not necessarily saying that I am, or who are, someone that you consider artistic or experienced or whatever, and they just know what colors to choose for something, or like if this is, this, I had my original, mid-tone starting point colors, and I would just know what shadow colors to use. And then when I started experimenting, I'm like, oh, I thought this one would be good, and it's not, and I like this one better. So I kind of thought it wouldn't be terrible to talk you through the process, to have an example of that on the show, because that's Beyond the Kit is partly about talking about what, once you know those basics in the Learn to Paint kits, where do you go from there? So it's all kinds of stuff that I would have loved to been able to put some of that information in the kit. That, you know, testing is, if you aren't sure whether this color wash is going to work on this color base coat, test it. I would have liked to have put that in, but you know, there's limited text because I was going to pay to have all those little book lists printed up and stuff. So anyway, we're going to let Quindy find us a raid so that we can keep on enjoying some kind of nerdy, fun, either miniature related or adjacent. Sometimes she mixes it up a little. And I will see you next Monday. If you have any requests for whether I start with Mako or start with Rael, or you have an idea for the Halloween miniature, go ahead and let me know. You know, if you don't pop it in the chat, you can let me know in personal message here on Twitch. But otherwise, I'll see you next week. I'll let Quindy hit the button now. Here we go. We are rating Soulway Studios TV. So say hi to them and share the Reaper love, and I'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.